All right, recording. Hey, everybody, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that each and every one of us are here. This is your report for the summer solstice and the solar eclipse new moon and the entire lunar cycle for this new moon, which was at 0 degrees Cancer. It was an annular solar eclipse. We're going to talk about this beautiful reading that I had the pleasure of doing for this time. We're going to talk about the month ahead. We are still in the middle of the eclipse season. The first was the lunar eclipse on the 5th of June. Wow, that was intense. Now that we're kind of on the other end of that, whoo boy, that really, and it was on the Gemini Sagittarius axis. So Gemini has been a big theme, is about empiricism, is about communication, short-term travel. It is really about the perception of reality and the language that we use, and the filter of our reality. But it's really about empiricism. That's Gemini, taking in all the data, insatiable curiosity. It is about survival. Gemini is still talking about the individualized consciousness. Sagittarius is the belief system, the truth, understanding. And so with the first of those eclipses, I think it was really intense. And I think that now that we have gotten to this point where we have reached the apex, of the yang energy with the summer solstice, we are now beginning our contraction phase of the year, which is now, it came to this full expansion. And if you notice, time started to slow down just a little bit, because as expanding, it's about to slow down, because it's going to come to the stop and then it's going to come back, just like any kind of like a roller coaster, right? You get to the top and then it kind of slows, and then the momentum, and then it comes back down. In this case, it's kind of the same, and energy in terms of speed. But we are now moving into this contraction phase. We had the new moon, which was a solar eclipse, the ring of fire, an annular solar eclipse. That means that it doesn't fully block out the sun. There is a ring of fire. We're going to look at the map because, oh boy, it is very connected. We're also going to talk about how this is impacting the chart of the United States, especially the natal sun, because the last of our eclipses is going to be on July 4th and 5th, depending on where you are in the world, and on the U.S.'s sun. So I am bringing this symbolism here because not only I have a lot of I have service members in my family. My dad's side, both were in combat in different wars, and my uncle. This was part of my uncle's house. We had been cleaning it out and getting the house ready to let go of and say goodbye to. And it's like saying goodbye to not only him and his house, but that's where he grew up. That's where my dad grew up. He inherited that house after my grandparents died. It's also where I spent the first half of my childhood, because this was my hometown. So there's been a lot, and I showed up there on the eclipse, so the lunar eclipse. So there's just been, it's been really intense. And this moment, it feels like if we have come to be very secure and to know where we stand, and we have taken full advantage of the Gemini season without attaching emotionally necessarily, which was really hard. The eclipse was in Sagittarius, and the moon was in Sagittarius. Belief systems, dogma, truth, understanding. It was really difficult. I think that we all got challenged quite a bit. And this reading suggests to me, it's so beautiful that if we really take into account that where we're headed is this Gemini energy, right? This is the north node of our moon. Our collective destiny, karmic destiny, is in this Gemini area for the next year and a half. This reading really suggests that the moment of the solstice and the eclipse, these eclipses, the energy lasts for 6 months, basically, until the next eclipse season. So where we're at, especially with 0 degrees Cancer, how it is the bottom of the chart, it is where we are rooted, it is the foundation, it is the center, right? It is the root structure that goes into the earth to meet at the center. We're all meeting at the center. And my dear friend Willow had shared at one point this, I believe it was a Gaelic or an Irish myth about man, and I hope she comments and like links it, because, and she'll probably explain it a lot better than I have, but how at the center, you know, everybody kind of pulls a thread in their own direction, but we're all still connected to the center, but we all have our different direction to go. And this is kind of the same thing with the fourth house in Cancer. The idea is that we're talking about the center of the globe, and that everybody is on the surface at completely different vantage points, because you cannot occupy the same point in space, right? So we all have a different vantage point, but where we unify is at the center. And that's what Cancer, the nadir, the bottom of the chart really represents. So we're going to look at that in the chart. We're going to talk about the whole month, and I'll go over this reading with you because it's just, you know, and I've already posted the picture, the photo of it on Facebook, Instagram, so you can open it up. I'm not going to really engage with the cards here because you can look at the photo, because also the direction of things is really important to look at. But if we have engaged with this Gemini energy, if we understand how important the Lover's card is, and diplomacy, commitment to a merging of duality instead of living in the opposition, which is, you know, we've really, really been tested on this since the full moon and the eclipse. As we've come into, you know, with the new moon, it's, if you have engaged with this Gemini energy and realized what it actually entails, because it's about empiricism, right? It is about collecting data. It is about the information, the movement of information, and seeing that we come to a point from Gemini into Cancer that we take a position. And that's what 0 degrees Cancer is. It's the lowering of one flag and raising another on a ship. And if we've successfully managed, and we're all in different places together, you know, all in different places together, right, where this is, then where we're headed is just magnificent. And I feel really hopeful, even though I think a lot of people have been feeling very either angry or scared or hopeless. And I know that all of those experiences are real, and we've all been feeling them in some degree. But if we are really rooted very strongly in who we are, deeply outside of all of this other stuff. Remember, Cancer is about boundaries, right? It is about the container in which we are emotionally contained. If we have those boundaries, we know where we're rooted, we are at the point of deepest sustainment, then where we're headed is incredibly potent for creation. If you're triggered by this, I will say, if this is a triggering symbol for you, I would really do some more work, because this is not going away. This is not, you know, the American flag is not just going to disappear. In fact, it is such a big part of this eclipse cycle, because we're talking the next eclipse, the lunar eclipse, is on the natal sun of the United States. This is where Mercury is right now, going retrograde, which means it'll come out of shadow at this degree of the natal sun. So this is important to understand the Cancer energy, how connected it is to the birth chart of the United States as a country, and how it's affecting the world, and where we're going. And so I would really recommend, if you are triggered by the American flag at this point, or if you are triggered by patriotism, that there's still more work to be done, because this is a really, really important dynamic to consider in this astrological time period and what these symbols mean. So we're going to talk about the reading, we're going to look at the chart, and we're going to go over the whole month and talk about the really big transits that are happening, because they are significant. We are going into a contraction phase all the way through. And so Neptune is going retrograde, Mercury is retrograde, Venus is going to come out of retrograde soon, Jupiter's retrograde, Saturn's retrograde, about to go into Capricorn. Let's see, Neptune, I said, going retrograde today. Whoo, boy. In some ways, this is good, because Neptune in Pisces going retrograde is really kind of pulling back a lot of like the confusion. I think it's really going to give us an opportunity to go back within and very deeply consider though that aspect, that Pisces aspect, especially because Mars is going to move out of Pisces pretty soon and go home into Aries. So that's a whole nother story. But Pluto's retrograde as well. Very contractive. You know, we are going to go into a phase now. We're really going to have to get clear with ourselves. And this reading is really bringing this out. And it was triggered by the solstice and especially the new moon. So we're going to look at the path of the eclipse as well, because it's really important to understand how these things play out on the world stage. And I don't know everything. This is just one piece that I saw that I think that is important to pay attention to. And it's very directly connected to the US and China and the world and how we organize ourselves. So look, with the reading, if you want to pull up the photo or pull up the picture from either Instagram or Facebook, now's a good time to do it. We have the energy coming into the situation, the Two of Discs. What are the discs? It is about material aspects. It's about the earth. It's about manifestation in a material way. And the Two of Discs is about change. And it is about the fluidity of change when you're moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn. So Jupiter in the first decan, the first 10 degrees of Capricorn, rules this sign. And so who is Jupiter? Jupiter is the leader. Jupiter is the ruler. Jupiter is expansive for abundance and fortune, but it's about beliefs. It's the master. It is wisdom. It is philosophy and religion. But it is leadership. And especially Jupiter has gone retrograde. There has been a shift in that leadership and our perception of that leadership. And so the energy coming into the situation is this change, right? The Ouroboros, the constant movement of time. And that even in physical material reality, obviously, things change. And so that's the energy coming into the situation. Where are we now? This moment, the summer solstice and the eclipse specifically, we have the Lovers, again, the Gemini archetype, the Lovers, and we have the 10 of Discs, which is wealth, ruled by Mercury, third decan in Virgo. Virgo is also a mutable energy. It's square to Sagittarius. Mutable, changeable. Virgo is about mastery, purity. It is about being organized. It is about being meticulous. It is about the actual things that you do in your material life that make a difference and a change and that can be changeable. I want to show this card real quick, though. I want to make out a point here. So here we have the 10 of Discs, wealth. Mercury in Virgo. Mercury rules Virgo because Virgo is about using the mind to actually organize the physical reality. This is the tree of life. This is the actual way the tree of life is organized. And this card right here, Malkuth, the bottom. And in the tree of life, we don't go up, we go down into manifestation. We start here and go down into manifestation. So this right here is the 10 of Discs, wealth. And it's, obviously financial wealth. And it's facing towards the change. So the change was the top of this tree of life Kabbalah imagery. And the bottom is what's facing the Ace of Wands, which is going to be the eventual outcome of these things. The Lovers, the head of the Lovers, also facing, the head is facing the Ace of Wands, the seed point of creating. This is where we're headed. This is the likely outcome, okay? If we have engaged with the change, if we have allowed the change, when did Jupiter go into Capricorn? Early December, December 1st or 2nd, actually, right around the time that the beginning of the eclipse season started. If we have engaged with that change from that time and have really, really tapped into it as opposed to resist it, the wealth, oh my gosh, the wealth of our material reality is so strong, and it is really, really strongly connected to where we're going in terms of creating something, the seed point of creation. Now the Lovers is the Gemini archetype, diplomacy, commitment, the merging of duality as opposed to roiling around in the opposition, which is, that's certainly been a big theme lately. I would say, especially since that lunar eclipse. Oh my gosh, because again, it was on the nodal axis of Gemini and Sagittarius. So we really felt it. The full moon being eclipsed in Sagittarius, it really pointed out where our belief systems were, but at the same time, it completely shadowed them. It eclipsed them. We didn't see the full illumination of what is often subconsciously hidden emotionally. And so we were all just like totally in it. We were in the shoot of our belief systems, and you could see, you watched it all play out. We all did. We all participated. We all watched it play out. The North Node is Gemini right now. This is empiricism. This is insatiable curiosity. This is about the data and the transfer of data. It is about the perception of reality, our filter, the language that we use in order to create and manifest the reality, right? If we are able to, in this moment, right, the eclipse happened because we're still on the nodal axis, last degree of Gemini into Cancer, right? Cancer, root system into who we are, our personal power. If we have allowed ourselves to be the lovers, right, to find the merge point between dualistic pieces of information or positions, again, the Ace of Wands, oh my gosh, it is so, this is the first reading that I've done, because I've been reading and channeling. I've just not been transmitting it as often because of this transition period. This is the best. We've hit a turning point with this eclipse. And so if you are rooted very truly in who you are and your position, and especially, you know, in terms of energetically, if you're rooted in this one of roses, this emotional heart-based commitment to ourselves and to kindness and love, I mean, purely basically, if that's where we're rooted, oh my gosh, it's where we stand. What we stand to create is so amazing and so powerful, but we have to be rooted there. And again, so below, so as above, right? We're in an initiation phase right now. Initiation in the Count of Saint Germain. We're being initiated into the path of our higher selves. Now, part of that, with the Six of Forces reversed, the waterfall, there's been an awareness of a loss of power, or a perceived loss of power, right? The waterfall is very powerful. It is obviously a stream of water that has so much momentum behind it that it is changing the landscape in which it lands, right? A huge waterfall is going to continue to deepen the pool that it flows into. Well, that's interesting. So, and it's also a six of forces. So there has been a perceived lack of power. And what I've seen is that we've continued, most people, not most, I shouldn't say that, many people have continued to externalize this perceived lack of power into their social justice movements, which is understandable and is part of the process. But what I've come to realize, and I've known this I personally have come to this conclusion, but it became very clear to me that it is not just me, but everybody very recently, that these situations where we feel like we've been victimized, where we feel like we've been losing power, again, Mars in Pisces, the martyr, the victim, the double downing on the victimhood, and being the warrior savior, right? If this perceived lack of power is being externalized, if we realize that, if we take that and internalize that situation and be like, okay, so these people are systemically have lost power, have their power taken. I feel like my power has been taken in some way, shape, or form, whatever it is. This is our initiation into our higher self. Now, the initiation in the Count of Saint Germain, number 14, what is that? 7 times 2. What is 7? 7 is the Chariot. It is the Cancer card in the tarot. This is our initiation into who we actually are and our personal power. If we can see that this perceived lack of power is really an internalized experience, this is our initiation. And so when you take a step back and you look at all the things that have been the result of the trauma that has resulted from situations in your life, abuse, neglect, you know, being engaged with narcissism in any kind of relationship, you know, and even within ourselves, when we are participating in that, when we feel like that we've lost power, if we can take that and and turn the lens back onto ourselves and take responsibility for how we can always have choice to empower ourselves no matter the situation that's happening. That's our initiation. Beyond that, an initiation, and it allows us to root down. Beyond that, it also, and this is something that came through very clear, when we have these situations, and they can go back to childhood, they can happen now, whenever, what they are is training ground. When you have these experiences, especially multiple times over, and you're just like, I don't understand why I keep attracting these people into my life, they are your teachers. They teach you what it feels like to be in situations that you give your power away. And in those situations, those moments is when I personally extend actual gratitude to people that have perpetuated actions against me that I was a victim of, right? So victimization and victimhood are different things. Victimization is something that happens. Victimhood is an identity that you're taking, right? So if you are able to step out of that, see the victimization, but not identify it, then you are able to see those situations as your initiation. They are allowing you to see who those people are and how they operate, so that number one, you don't operate like that, because we all have the potential to be horrible asshole people. Like, if you don't know that already, I'm going to tell you that we all have the potential to be the most awful and horrific, and we all have the potential to be the most loving and Christ-like, if you want to use that. All of us. And if you don't think that you have perpetuated or perpetrated any kind of abuse or neglect or narcissism towards anybody, I would think again, because as long as you're a human being, that's happening, and that is our work. We have to empower ourselves so that we don't continue to try to disempower other people because we haven't dealt with our own shit, right? It's an initiation. We're initiating into our higher selves, which means that we take responsibility for ourselves and our own empowerment. And it also is an initiation because it allows you to see very clearly the things you may have missed before that brought you to a point of being victimized in the first place, right? How many times do I have to be with an abusive sexual predator, narcissist, whatever? And I'm speaking personally. How many times until you're just like, oh, I see now. I know I ignored these red flags because I didn't know what they were, and now I know what they are, right? And so we all have to do this work. And if you are aware of this and you are committed, oh, where we're going is so beautiful. Okay, so that's the transmission of the energetic reading. So let's get into the charts and let's look at the notes, because there's a lot to talk about. So here's the chart for the solstice. We see the sun has just gone past 0 degrees of Cancer. We have the North Node here. Here's Mercury. Mercury went retrograde. Let's see here. Mercury went retrograde, what, on the 18th, I believe. Yes. Station retrograde on the 18th. Okay. 13 to 14 degrees of Cancer is the US sun. Okay. And so we have Mercury retrograde now, right? Mercury, what does Mercury rule? Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. So let's talk about Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini, retrograde in Cancer, about the home, right? About our boundaries, about our emotional boundaries. Mercury, again, is about the movement of information. It's about communication. It's about messages. It's about data. It's actually also about short-term travel and going home. So we're going retrograde. We are taking another pass at where we're grounded emotionally, where we're rooted, what's our foundation, what do we identify as our home. And remember, this is the degree of the sun, natal sun of the US. So this is very much about our national identity too, you know, our ancestral identity, the connection to the actual land, right? And whether or not you were born here or you are an immigrant and you have gone through the process of being part of this nation, we're all in a position now where we're backpedaling in a good way. We're getting a chance to reconsider from a mental perspective, even in a physical, you know, going back into your home. reconsider, traveling back into your home. That could be, certainly with like more push on potential lockdowns. That I don't really, I don't get that. Although that could happen. What I'm really feeling is that it's more about reconsidering where we're grounded, how we perceive our home, our ancestry, how we perceive where we're rooted, where our personal power is, and how we communicate that. So Mercury is going to come back to this degree, the natal sun, at the same time that Venus exits shadow, and we'll get to that. Same day. So Venus and Mercury are going to exit their retrograde shadows on the same day, which is later in the month. So we'll get there. So what happened on the solstice? Obviously, we get to 0 degrees. We have the moon in Gemini still, square Mars in Pisces, and then Mars in Pisces was sextile to Jupiter retrograde in Capricorn. So Mars is the warrior, right? Mars is not the general. Jupiter is the leadership. Now, Jupiter is retrograde in Capricorn. So the leadership over these institutions is getting, it is certainly, we're going back over that as well. What the leadership means, what these institutions mean, what they stand for. And of course, now Jupiter is in the same degree as Pluto and is soon going to meet Pluto again, which has been pulling everything thread by thread, just destroying all these cultural traditions, just destroying them. And so, but before we get to that, on the solstice, Mercury, the warrior, is in a sextile to Jupiter, right? As we get to the end of Pisces, the energy is really dissipating. Everything has been dissolved into one amorphous mass. And at the end of Pisces, it starts to consolidate and to differentiate because the cycle is about to start back over with the new seed. Mars, if Mars has been fighting and has been the warrior, the champion of the victim, right? It depends on where you've been with Mars. And so the sextile to Jupiter is really an opportunity for the leadership, even if it's our internal leadership or the shift in leadership, to really give Mars an opportunity to start differentiating into the next cycle. Because when Mars comes into Aries, it is full steam ahead. I mean, Mars is in his home territory and is gonna go to war because, again, Mars is not the general. It is not the leadership. Mars is the action, right? And has been acting on this Pisces energy now for a while. And we've talked about this many times about doubling down on the victimhood, doubling down on the martyrdom, doubling down on being the savior. And now, if this is all, like I said, it's dissipating, it's dissolving, and it is allowing, and it's coming back into. So depending on where you're situated with all of this stuff, if you continue to be a victim or a savior for the victims, when Mars comes into Aries, that is going to be the position that you are going to charge forward with. And so it's really important to be aware of that. Now, the sextile to Jupiter on the day of the solstice, right? The 0 degrees Cancer, where we root into our foundation. There's been a shift in leadership. The leadership in terms of our institutions is being renegotiated in a lot of ways with Jupiter retrograde. And so the sextile to Mars is an opportunity to activate what Mars is going to do when it comes into Aries. And this moment is starting again. It's like everybody's going off in a different direction with the new moon. That's what this degree of Pisces is like with the new moon, everybody realizes it's time to divide their influence and go in their separate directions. And that's definitely what's happening right now. So the solstice at this time, we root in collectively into our foundation. And then the shift in leadership, not even the shift, but the going backwards in the leadership, reconsidering the leadership of these institutions is activating and harmonizing with Mars in Pisces. And if it really depends on where your energy was with Mars and Pisces. If, again, same thing, if you've been doubling down on victim savior stuff, externalizing this whole process, trying to be the savior of every seemingly oppressed group, in your thought, in your action, your deeds, then that is certainly going to be where your energy goes when Mars goes into Aries. And that is, it's going to be, woo, boy, full speed ahead, charge, right? But I think that this, if you are really in, if you're really rooted into your foundation deeply as a person and not based on externalized experiences, the leadership from within really harmonize with Mars. It's like, okay, it's time for everybody to kind of go in their own direction, to start dividing their influence for the next cycle. As we move into, so here's the next day is the new moon. So the new moon, and I'll even let you look at my notes. Here's the new moon, the solar eclipse, right? So we had the moon at 0 degrees Cancer with the sun. We had, and we're going to look at the chart or the path of the eclipse, because it's really important to pay attention to what happens. You do pay attention to what happens externally. So we had the eclipse, right? The ring of fire. Before that, the moon was conjunct the North Node, the last degree of Gemini. And then after the eclipse, the sun and moon both quincunx 0 degrees Saturn, 0 degrees Aquarius, where Saturn retrograde is. Excuse me. 0 degrees Aquarius. This is the concretization of an ideal. It is the start of building something that is going to last lifetimes, that is beyond, and it's for, we're talking about Aquarius, so we're talking about the 11th house, we're talking about humanity as a whole, we're talking about the networks, the social networks, the community. And so 0 degrees Aquarius, especially revolutionary and thinking ahead a lot, Saturn at this degree, God, it's just been relentless. And this is right on top of my ascendant. Like, I have a 0 degrees Aquarius ascendant. So it has just been relentless, that no matter, we are building something. And so the sun and the moon, quincunx, what is a quincunx? It is something that does not fit, right? 0 degrees Cancer, rooting down into the essence of who we are, right? Still, we're in the individual aspect still of the chart. Aquarius is about the group aspect, but in Cancer, we're still talking about individuation. We're still talking about ourselves as individual people. This is something to really consider, because we all have to be rooted in ourselves and our foundation right now. So when we do that, it doesn't seem to fit where Saturn is, which is like, we are building the future, right? And so it's not that it doesn't fit at all. It requires an adjustment and perspective. So this is on the solar eclipse. And then the moon squares Chiron and then sextiles Uranus, both at 10 degrees. One is at Aries and one is at Taurus. Chiron at 10 degrees of Aries right now is about new symbols, a teacher giving new symbolic form to images. And so things that had represented something are now being upgraded and updated to be more symbolic, as opposed to being something that references something in real time. It's kind of hard. It's seeing things as symbolic as opposed to actual representations. And because we're talking about Chiron, again, we're talking about the wounded healer, the victim savior mentality. And so the moon in Cancer, this degree of Cancer, 10 degrees Cancer, is a diamond being cut for the first time. Like the process of cutting a diamond, which is, the diamond is the hardest, one of the hardest substance on the planet. It's all carbon, but it's so tightly packed together that it is so hard to break those bonds between the carbon atoms. That's what diamond, and diamond is able to hold an incredible amount of heat as well. And so it's able to hold energy incredibly. And so when the moon is squaring Chiron, right, we're starting to, it's a hard process to cut a diamond, and it requires a lot of energy, but what we're doing is shaping it into something beautiful. That's kind of the idea. So with Chiron, if we're not seeing outside of the fact that these things that are happening are really symbolic, right, of something else, if we're still enmeshed in the duality of victim and savior, for instance, then we're not going to see that these traditional images are really symbolic, right? And so the moon, it's trying to, we're having this personalized experience of being like cut into like a beautiful form, that we're in our roughest stage. And because it's so hard as a diamond, it takes a lot of energy. I would say that if we have not gotten to that point, that really struck a chord with me. And then the same time, it's sextile Uranus, which is at 10 degrees Taurus, which is a Red Cross nurse. It is the compassionate linking of all of humanity. And again, if you follow Uranus, you're going to follow the trajectory of the awakening process. So Uranus is giving us this opportunity to really link in a very real way. And part of our personalized experience of being a diamond in the rough and being cut into a form, again, is very supported by this awakening process that is pointing us to the fact that we are all, and it's consecration to humanity in general. It's like kind of giving of yourself to take care of humans, no matter what side they're on, right? That's kind of like, the Red Cross nurse is taking care of everybody, regardless of what side they're on. And that is the Uranus aspect is the Aquarian age, is where we're coming to in the awakening. So this is where the lunar, or the solar eclipse was, which was actually kind of the middle of the night. So it happened just like a couple hours after the eclipse, or the solstice itself. So here we go. There we go. That's close enough. So there you can see, here's Chiron 9 to 10, Uranus 9 to 10, and then we have the moon then hours and hours after is gonna, and then the moon is going to then also today is going to conjunct with Mercury. Let's see here. It's close. It's getting close. It's getting close. There we go. Solar eclipse. So, yeah. So the new moon, right? Setting intentions for the lunar cycle. So here we are. And then that is going to be, what seeds did we plant for this summer solstice and this new moon cycle solar eclipse? Now, what seeds did we plant? What is our intention as we, if we are following this reading that I got, if we are able to embrace the change that's been happening, see like how much it's actually giving us, and also embrace the archetype of the lovers, the Gemini archetype, where we're headed is amazing. And 0 degrees of Cancer is allowing us to root into our foundation. So this is the essence of the rest of this lunar cycle, which is going to include the full moon lunar eclipse that's happening on July 4th, which we'll go over as we go over the month. So this moment here with the moon, with the eclipse, having Uranus and Chiron very much attached to it, like just hours afterwards, is really suggesting to me like we have got to get out of within the dualistic state. And if you've already done that and you have found yourself at the 0 degree mark, then where we're headed is amazing. And if not, it's going to be really challenging. It's already been challenging. I think we've learned a lot since the lunar eclipse on the 5th that has brought us to this moment. So, and then we're at today. So let's look at today is the 22nd. So Neptune moves in. Neptune in Pisces goes retrograde. The sun, the moon, and Mercury retrograde are all in Cancer, which means that the moon is going to trine Neptune today. The moon is also going to trine, or is going to conjunct Mercury in Cancer. This is now retrograde at the natal sun of the United States. And Neptune is going to be retrograde until probably looks like right after Thanksgiving. So after the election. right? The election in the United States is going to go back to 19 degrees Pisces, and then so is going to come out of shadow much later in the year. And so this, I feel like, is a blessing in my mind, is that it could get more, again, it just depends on where you're situated. This, I feel like, is really going to allow the propaganda machine and all of the fake news and all of the, just, there's so much like propaganda, there's so much information that is not clear, the fog machine. I think that this is really going to allow that to I don't want to say take the power away of it, but I think it will. I think it's going to force it internalize. Again, we're all in this contraction phase. And so Neptune going retrograde, we're going to pull all this energy within, and we're going to get really deep into these waters ourselves and go back over some territory here that we've been subjected to for the last couple of months. And so today, Moon conjunct Mercury in Cancer. The Moon is going to trine Neptune before stations retrograde. And so we're going to have one last emotional experience of this 21 degrees of Pisces, which is really just like naive hope, a tactile hope of like the future, without any real indication other than our own intuition. Which I feel is very much part of where this reading is, especially for this lunar cycle. And then the Moon is going to be opposite Pluto and Jupiter. And so again, the Moon in late Cancer, as we get more consolidated in our decision, and we're talking about personalized experience because we're talking about the Moon is going to oppose Jupiter, and it's going to oppose Pluto, both retrograde in Capricorn. And so I think we're really going to feel how the challenge, the emotional challenge with our position and what is being just completely excavated and brought to the surface with Pluto in terms of what's dying, and also the internalized perspective of leadership in terms of our economic, social institutions, our government institutions. The leadership is Jupiter. And so what is happening on that realm is really going to be challenged by where we're at personally in terms of our, the Moon is at home in Cancer, very powerful here. This is her home base. And so there's going to be, in some ways, it's about finding the fulcrum. You don't want to get too far into your Cancer emotional, like, I am so strong in this position that I can't see anything else. But you also can't get sucked into like the complete devastation of what Jupiter and Pluto are doing in Capricorn right now. So it's really about finding that fulcrum today. And I think that Neptune going retrograde is going to be, honestly, it's either going to get even more confusing, and there's going to be like deep fakes. There's going to be, you just can't trust anything. But in essence, that is going to be a blessing, because it's going to force us even more now to fine tune our intuition and understand and be able to discern what's real and what's not, and which is going to be absolutely necessary, because there are too many outside influences that do not give two shits about what happens to the majority of Earthlings and humans on this planet, and they will stop at nothing to create and perpetuate a narrative that gives them the edge or gives them power. And so it's going to get deeper, but it's also going to force us to get very clear with ourselves within. So I feel the relief of this Neptune going retrograde, because I've been doing this particular work of honing my intuition now for a while. So let's move on, right? This week, we're just talking about this week. And so I'll start to give more Cliff Notes versions so we can see Venus stations retrograde. Oh, before we move on, I want to show you this. Okay, so first we're going to look at the map of the solar eclipse. And I want to show this in particular, because this is China. This is where the eclipse went. So the band, you can see like it's loose here, and then it gets more and more. Here, this little right here, look at this, right over Taiwan. All right, so if you're not familiar with Taiwan, make yourself familiar with it, because this is a big deal, okay? This ring of fire went right over Taiwan. The other thing to look at is Hong Kong is right here, and you can't see it. Let me see if I can move this out of the way because it is here. But right around here is Wuhan. Okay, so Hong Kong has been a big deal. Wuhan obviously has been a big deal, and then Taiwan. Now I want to show you what I saw in the news today about Taiwan. Look at this. The president of Taiwan has made their defense industry as China priority. Their defense industry is priority as China increases pressure on the island. Look at this. Okay, what does this look like? This looks like the U.S. is getting very involved. Going to be very involved. You bet your ass that Taiwan is going to be on the main stage for us moving forward. And why? Because Taiwan does not want to be part of China, and it wasn't supposed to be part of China. And it is independent, right? And here we have Hong Kong, who also wants to be independent of China. It was meant to, and there are a lot of gaps in my historical knowledge, so I'm not going to sit here and act like I know every piece of information about this, but I'm telling you, look at this. This is where the eclipse happened. You bet your ass the U.S. is getting involved in Taiwan when it comes to China, right? Because this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. And we're talking about our national sovereignty. We're talking about protection. We're talking about boundaries when we're talking about Cancer. Okay. Now, I'm not saying what's right and what's not right, what we should or shouldn't do. I'm just telling you where the path of the eclipse is, and I'm showing you what came up in the news today about Taiwan, which was smack dab in the middle. And there's other things. You can see the path of the eclipse, but this is really important. So this is just something to consider when we're talking about. And so just keep an eye on what happens in Taiwan and China in regards to us. Look at that, because it's going to be really important. Because again, we're talking about national sovereignty, we're talking about freedom, we're talking about what these countries represent, and we're talking about 0 degrees Cancer, the crab shell, the boundaries, where we're rooted, where is our foundation. Okay, all right. So now let's move on because this is getting long. So the 25th. This is we're still in week 1 of the new moon. So the first week, first quarter here. Venus stations in Gemini direct. It went retrograde on the 13th of May. It is leaving shadow. We'll go back to 22 degrees Gemini. Dancing couples and a harvest festival. That sounds like the lovers, doesn't it? And is going to leave shadow on the 27th of July. Which is the same day that Mercury is going to leave its shadow, 27th of July. Put that in your hat, right? Because and that's the next lunar cycle, right? The next new moon is on the 20th of July. So we'll talk more about that later. Stations direct in Gemini. What is 6 degrees of Gemini, which is where Venus is right now? It is workmen drilling for oil. It is about ambition. It is about getting to the energy source that comes from our ancestry, right? What is oil but carbon that has been, I don't know what the right word is, but it's trapped into the surface and it has been cooking for a while, and then we extract it. And so now we're going to go back over all this Gemini. So Venus went back, and we really got a sense of what is important to us, what do we value, what is beautiful, what it harmonizes with us when it comes to our relationships, when it comes to our resources. Remember, Venus rules Taurus, which is where Uranus is, and it rules Libra, which is where we're going to have our first quarter square, the moon in Libra. So not only does Venus rule material, she does rule an air sign, and so she's not totally out of her element in Gemini. It's about, again, curiosity, empiricism, but Venus is about what feels good. It is about what's important to us. What do we value, right? Now, we're going to go back all over this again. So this is going to be interesting. That's all, and we have a Virgo moon. So we're going to have this Virgo moon where emotionally we're going to be really organized. We're going to want to know where everything is placed emotionally. We're going to want to get to purifying ourselves emotionally, making sure everything is exactly where it needs to be. And then Venus is going to turn direct. And we are going to start going back over all this Gemini energy again, because we had all this chance to really deeply consider what do we value. And now we're going to apply that going forward. The 26th, which is Friday, we're still in week 1, Mars squares the North Node. That means Mars will be at the last degree of Pisces, squaring the North Node. So the last degree of Pisces is the archetype. We're about to move into the new cycle, the seed of the new cycle. So squaring the North Node, the North Node is like, hey, we're at this, everything is splayed out in front of us, the best of our society, and now it's time to make a decision. And although those two things seem like that they are one and the same, they are both mutable energies, but they are square to each other, because Pisces is about the water and the emotions and the spiritual, right? And the North Node is in Gemini, which is about the mind and information and communication. So Mars, the warrior, is focused on the archetype from a spiritual perspective, and the North Node is our collective destiny, is about the archetype of what represents us mentally before we make a decision. And they are square to each other, because Gemini is all about the mind and Pisces is all about the spirit. And oh boy, this is going to be important. We're going to have to lean into this square pretty hard, because this is going to really impact where we go from here, because the next day the moon moves into Libra, is going to oppose Mars as it enters his home sign of Aries. And so Libra at 0 degree, you know what I mean? I don't know, I can't remember the degree exactly, but Libra, ruled by Venus, right? This is about balance, aesthetics, symmetry, the scales being balanced. So the moon in Libra, oh my gosh, the people pleasing forever and ever, is going to oppose Mars. So emotionally, we're going to want everything to be balanced, and Mars is going to come into Aries and be like, nope, it's time to charge. It's going to be intense. This is still the first week, guys. And then we have our first quarter square with the moon in Libra and the sun in Cancer. Crisis of action. So we're going to have this moment, and then we're going to have the crisis in action between the moon, which is the feminine aspect, and the sun, which is our masculine aspect of our collective personalities. Oh my God. All right. So, and then the moon squares Mercury as well. So week 2, Jupiter conjuncts Pluto for the second time. Saturn then right after that goes into Capricorn retrograde. Week 3. Oh, and then we have the full moon lunar eclipse. 14 degrees Cancer and Capricorn. So we're talking about the natal sun, and in opposition to the natal sun of the United States. This is when you're halfway through Cancer, you go from decision to consolidation. And so 14 degrees Cancer is an old man facing northeast, is about the vast mystery and the unchangeable truth despite everything going on, which is interesting that is the degree of the natal sun of the United States, that there is a truth that is deeper than anything that's going on the surface. Capricorn, 14 degrees Capricorn, it is about the ancient tradition, the what's the word I'm looking for? The artifacts of our tradition and culture, being unearthed in some ways. And this is where the eclipse is. I think there's going to be something that really comes up at this point that's really going to challenge. And this is the last of the lunar eclipse, or the eclipse season, on the 4th of July. We're going to have to, again, come to some really hard decisions. And I think we're going to have to decide if it's the externalized traditions and culture with the moon, emotionally we're going to feel this way, or if it's going to be the vast permanence of truth that is deeper than anything on the surface, which is where the sun will be with the United States. So we're going to have to be again, same thing with the lunar eclipse at the beginning of June. The shadow of the earth eclipses the moon, so we don't get full illumination of where we're headed, or we don't get full illumination of what's going on subconsciously within us, our internalized waters. So I feel like that there's going to be a big distraction, and people are not, again, we're going to have to be very clear with ourselves in order to really see that it is our emotional aspect that may be wanting to hold on to these traditional artifacts and images from a culture that has gone past, as opposed to being deeply our the conscious aspect of our personality being very rooted into something that is deep and permanent. This is going to happen the 4th of July. It's going to be an interesting day. So we move, and that's the full moon. So that now moves us into the second half, the third quarter. Mercury stations direct at 6 degrees Cancer, is also going to exit its shadow on the same day as Venus at the end of July. Remember, put that in your cap, 7/27. That's going to be an important day. Neptune is still retrograde. And then we have the third quarter square, which is the moon is going to be a 22 Aries, and the sun is going to be a 22 Cancer. Crisis in consciousness. And considering that Mars is in Aries now, this moon in Aries is really going to give us kind of a emotional, personalized experience of where we're headed with Mars, because we're going to be feeling this emotionally, and then Mars is going to be acting it out. And then we end this lunar cycle with a new moon again in Cancer, which will be at the end of Cancer. So it'll be interesting. We'll have all this time to plant, we planted new seeds. And then as we move into the next cycle, we're going to plant new seeds at the end of the Cancer archetype, which is really it's about to move into Leo. So we've gotten very, very firm and rooted in who we are, and then allows ourselves to be the full expression of us, right? That's the Leo energy. It is ruled by the sun. It is the center of the attention. It is the star of the show, right? It is our full expression of our heart's opening. And so by that time, we'll be in good shape, I think, to make these kinds of connections. But let's stop the share, because I think that's a lot of information. And the things to remember that I think, to just recap, are really important. Number one, Mercury is at retrograde on the United States natal sun, okay? Venus goes direct in Gemini, and is going to go back. Its shadow exits its shadow at 22 degrees Gemini on the same day as Mercury in end of July. Neptune is going retrograde today, right? So we have Mercury retrograde, we have Neptune retrograde, we have Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde, we have Pluto retrograde. And there'll be more. There'll certainly be more retrograde. Mars is going to go retrograde on the day that Hillary Clinton is testifying in court. We're going to do a whole thing about that. And Uranus will be retrograde too. There's going to be, and now we're moving into the yin phase. We have hit the summer solstice. So the new moon really is about planting our roots. It's about knowing what our personal foundation of personal power is. And if you feel disempowered, if you've had an experience of feeling personally disempowered, even by actual events in your past, or just what's happening outside, just remember that this is an initiation process in order to learn how to exit that victim, savior, martyrdom dynamic and start to take responsibility for how you feel empowered. And this is an initiation into our higher selves. And if we're committed, truly, ultimately committed to ourselves and to love and to our fellow human beings and animals and plants, right? All aspects of this planet, if we're deeply committed to love of everything that encompasses our reality, where we're headed is the creation of something just so magnificent that I just, and I've been here, this is certainly the message. It's going to be so much more magnificent than we cannot possibly even imagine right now. And it's really the bounds of our imagination, which, the imagination is boundless, right? That is the Pisces energy. There's no limits. There are no boundaries to our imagination. So, and that goes both ways. And that is something that is really important to understand, is that the bounds of our imagination and what we're capable of is not limited to one end of the spectrum. And I think it's really important that we don't get trapped there, but we be very clear, because that is the Gemini dynamic. Is just like, you got the end, the spectrum, the ends of the spectrum, the book ends. And so there, for all of the beauty and magnificence and harmony and all of the love, there is fear, there is hatred, there is horrific crimes on this other side. And we have to see both of these aspects in order to figure out where we in fact are going to be rooted. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for taking care of yourselves and being part of this process. I'm going to be going back to the daily medicine. It's just a matter of getting situated. This is going to be on YouTube, so everything you need is in the description box below. If you're not already following me on social media, there is going to be, again, there's going to be transitions to other platforms, but I really wanted to get this information out because it's so important. If you have any questions, reach out through email, reach out through Instagram, reach out through Facebook. I'm also, I don't think I'm going to do Twitter. I've been thinking about it, and I don't think so. And yeah, plant some seeds of personal empowerment and into a very deep foundation of yourself and where you're rooted, because this is really how we're going to create the new earth, is from here. I love you all so much. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to see you on the next video, whenever that is. Bye.